wasn't paying attention. I have to pay attention. Take that.
Hey everybody, Steven here, and today looking at Miles Morales on the Steam Deck and the AOK ZOE A1, and we're looking at the performance and what the different settings that you can use with these two different handhelds to get the best performance on them. With that being said, this is a special video because I've actually reached out to a friend, Vicarious Nick, and he's going to be doing the Steam Deck portion of this. So we're kind of wrapping up two different things, right? We have what are the best settings to get performance out of these, but also looking at what performance are we getting with the Steam Deck versus the AOK ZOE A1. So with that being said, let's go ahead and shift over now to Nick's portion of the video.
Oh, my bad. Hello, everybody. My name's Nick. First, I just want to say thank you, Steve, so much for having me on your channel. Hope you guys have been enjoying the content so far. As you already know, today we are looking at Miles Morales Spider-Man on the Steam Deck, basically to see how well does it run and if it's worthy of a purchase, really. As you can see, clearly it is running, but when I'm just playing the games, I don't need to have the FPS rating and all that on there, but you know, for you guys, why not? I'll turn it on for you. So there we go, that looks a little bit better, so you can see how much is being used on the Steam Deck as we're playing the game, from the RAM usage, GPU, CPU usage, and of course the FPS. Now, this is the way that I have it set to. There's a ton of different ways you can do it, depending on your usage and how you like to run your games. I am more of a performance guy. I don't need the best visuals on the market in order to have a good experience. As long as the game runs, doesn't stutter, doesn't lag, that's what I'm here for, and that's why I have it at a 30 FPS cap. So it is a constant 30. It doesn't go below, it doesn't go above. It's just strictly at 30 and it runs flawlessly. I've also noticed that going through the settings on this game on the Steam Deck, I did have to change quite a bit of different settings in order to get it to run efficiently, or at least to where I'm at right now. So what I mean by that is it does come with some nice little presets from low, medium to high, but sadly none of those worked to the best ability that it could, so I set it to custom and I did change some things. So going under graphics first, if we set it to custom, go down to texture quality, set it to medium, texture filtering 2x, shadow quality can be set to low, ambient occlusion can just completely turn off, screen space reflections you can leave on, of course no ray tracing abilities here on the Steam Deck. Going down to the geometry, level of detail we can leave on medium as well. And then these are the two biggest ones that I've noticed that really tank the performance. So putting the traffic density and crowd density to very low is going to give you the best performance on the Steam Deck by far. The reason for that obviously is the more things that are populating within the world, the more it's taxing on the actual GPU. So lowering that to as low as it can go, it doesn't make it so it feels like you're in a ghost town. You'll still see cars on the road and people walking around. It just won't be as congested, but it's more than playable. Then we go to hair quality and the weather particle quality. We can leave those both on medium. Going down to the camera effects, you can leave these pretty much default, so depth of field high and then everything else on, and then you can mess with this stuff to whatever you prefer. I like having less motion blur overall, and my field of view I left it alone, but you can make it wider if you like, and then the film grain and sharpness again up to your liking, doesn't really matter. If we go to the actual display settings, I am running this at full screen at the full native resolution of the Steam Deck, which is 1280 by 800 resolution. Aspect ratios on auto, VSync, always turn that off. Brightness and contrast I left alone. But here's a big thing. So by default, the upscaling method is set to the AMD, which is called AMD FSR 2.1. Now, most people will probably say just use the AMD because that's what the CPU is inside the Steam Deck. But honestly, I think the game looks a lot better running it on the iGTI and then having it at a dynamic resolution scaling of whatever FPS you prefer. So you can turn this completely off if you don't really mind having a set frame per second cap, and you can set an upscale quality. You set that to performance is what I would recommend. But if you are looking for a specific 30 FPS cap, I'd recommend setting this to 30. Same goes for if you want a 40 FPS cap or a 60, they do have those options as well. But again, for this video, just for the sake of having a very stable, less framey, less glitchy performance, we're going to keep it at a steady 30. But just for fun and for some extra footage for Steve, I will set it to a no FPS cap, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So if I was to turn this off, leave it on performance, and then in the Steam Deck settings as well, I do have it on a frequent limit of 30, but I'm going to turn this off here as well. 60 refresh rate, nothing else is altered. Everything else is still default. So out of curiosity, let's just see what kind of performance we end up getting. So we're going to do a quick little pause here. As you could see throughout that entire performance test there, we really didn't get any higher than 50 FPS. There was a couple times we went higher than 50, which is nice to see. But in general, as an average, you're seeing 34 to 40 FPS. Not amazing, but definitely playable and more than adequate for most people, including myself. But again, if you're not getting 60 FPS anyway, that's where I normally would recommend just leaving it on a 30 FPS cap, and you're going to be good for the entire duration of the game. Now, if you've played Miles Morales, you'll know that I'm roughly like maybe 1/3 done with the game at this point, almost halfway. And I've done this much already on the Steam Deck without any issues, no crashes or whatsoever. So the game runs flawlessly without any issues as long as you use those settings that I recommended at the beginning. So with that, thank you so much, Steve, again for having me in the video. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of it. Make sure to leave a like on it, of course, and subscribe to this man. He's a beautiful man and deserves it. But with that, hope you guys have a wonderful day. Peace out.
A big thank you to Nick for doing that for me. And now shifting over to the AOK ZOE A1, these are the optimal settings that I think you should use for the best performance. I'm actually running this in 1080p, and with that, I have the AMD FSR 2.1 turned on. There is no dynamic resolution scaling, that is turned off, and I have the upscale quality to balanced. And so with this, I think is really the sweet spot. And we have the medium graphical settings. I haven't really tweaked these. It's just what this does by default. You can of course increase that, but just keep in mind you are going to lose some FPS when you do that. Down at the bottom, some of the camera effects I've adjusted just a little bit, but other than that, everything else is on. And again, this is just by default what this does with the medium settings. And it does pretty well in terms of the FPS. We're getting pretty solid ranges here. So looking at the FPS range, it has a momentary drop to 29 when I'm doing a battle here in a little bit, and then it caps out at 60 when there's really nothing going on because I'm looking up, so there's no city in the background or anything. Average that out, we get 45 FPS. I'm not letting the MSI Afterburner average this out. This is just the math of adding the two numbers, dividing by 2. So a couple things to cover here. I will actually showcase the performance and the ultra performance in a little bit, and that does have an increase in the FPS, but it does make everything a little bit more blurry, so I don't personally prefer that. And at that point, when you start getting towards the ultra performance, it actually starts just looking like the 800p. One of the benefits of the AOK ZOE A1 here, though, is the 6800U AGPU and the performance increase over the deck. So right off the bat, this is doing 1080p. It can do 1200p, and if you are going to use the AMD FSR 2.1, you could actually play that on balanced. You couldn't go quality, it's just going to crash the game, and you can't do it without that unless you do low. I've played it where I've put it to high and it actually runs out of RAM and it just pushes the AGPU to its limit, so it crashes the game. But you could do that. I wouldn't recommend it. It is just low FPS, And with this, we can get these higher FPS, and that's definitely the benefit, right? So I would say you're going to want the AMD FSR on. You could do it at 1200p, you could do it at 800p, and that's really going to cap it out. That would be a solid 60 FPS, but I just think 1080p is the sweet spot because we are looking at an 8-inch screen versus the 7-inch screen on the deck. And that's the benefit, is the bigger increase in performance that we're going to get out of this hardware and the larger screen size. So take advantage of that and do that 1080p and still hit really good FPS with this. The bigger issue that people are going to run into is when we look at the hardware, the A1 is double the price of the deck, but it isn't double the performance. It's more like a 30-ish% increase. Now you do get this huge upside, which is I get to play games in 1080p or 1200p, and if I get to run the AMD FSR software with it, then yeah, I could actually play that game, and it could be a AAA game, and I could hit above 30 FPS on average. Some games that are not as graphically demanding, you can actually play those at 1200p, 60 FPS solid the whole time. But with these more demanding games, that's the benefit. So I would definitely take that over the deck because it just looks very good. What's crazy though is in certain instances where the deck just has really good software. What they've done with that is incredible. And I've noticed with the deck that some games that it's either hitting the same mark or it's even besting these other handhelds that have better hardware. And so with this 1080p, we're using the FSR and we're getting, I would say, similar numbers in terms of the FPS that Nick was getting with the deck. The big thing here is the slightly bigger screen, and then we are seeing this in 1080p. So to me, that looks better. And I don't think this video is going to do that justice, but 1080p over 800p, it just has a level of clarity to it that is just very, very good. If you go to 1200p, even better. And that's the big upside here. But again, you're talking about double the price for this handheld. The Steam Deck is just hard to beat. They just have really nailed down their price point and they have really good performance to boot. If you do have the extra money and you're like, hey, I want to get something like this, I still think it's awesome. I do reach for the A1 a lot of times, and it's because of the bigger screen and because I get to play games in 1080p and also other games that the deck doesn't actually have the capacity to play, like Destiny 2. And so with this, I think 1080p, medium settings, and then the FSR set to balanced is the way to go. And then we're going to hit that, we just saw it a second ago, the drop to 29 FPS. But as you can tell, we're in the mid 40s, right? Sometimes we'll go into the 30s, things start getting pretty hectic, but in general, we're like low mid 40s the whole time that we're playing. And we can even jump up into the 50s sometime as well. Now, if you don't actually turn the FSR on, what ends up happening is at 800p, you can be in the 40s and 50s, kind of like what we're at right now. If you jump up to 1080p, and this is going to be for medium settings, then you're going to be really in the 30s, low 30s to mid 30s. You can jump to the 40s every now and then, but it just doesn't perform as well. You really are going to want that FSR turned on. And then especially at 1200p, like I mentioned, if you actually do high settings, it just crashes the game. You can play low settings, but expect low 30s, upper 20s. If it gets super busy, you can sustain low 30s the whole time, and I still think it plays smooth, but you end up looking as like, how much of a difference am I noticing with this? So we do have these overlapping instances where you just have to find that kind of sweet spot. Shifted it over to performance now. We're going to see a subtle increase, but to me it still looks pretty comparable to balanced. We're going to see more jumps into the 50s here. But again, the extra FPS, are you noticing a massive difference with that or not? Now it starts getting too busy. One of the things that you're going to notice as you increase to performance, or especially if you increase to ultra performance, is, I mentioned this earlier, everything's going to get a little bit fuzzy. You're going to see this drop in the resolution. So now we're probably shifting down to 800p, and with that, things just look more pixelated, which is why I prefer 1080p, or if you can get it the 1200p, it just smooths all of that out. It's something that I've talked about in previous videos, which is as you increase resolution, especially with something like this where we do have a very high pixel density on this screen, it actually acts as an anti-aliasing kind of software thing that you're getting with it, because the pixel density here is smoothing out all the rough edges. You could use software and actually, let's turn on anti-aliasing, let's use whatever variation of that we want to use, or leave that completely off, don't touch it, but let's go ahead and just increase the resolution, and we kind of just naturally get that built in. All right, let's go ahead and jump ahead now where I switch this over to the ultra performance, and you can see the difference here. It is there for sure. It is, I would say it's subtle in the sense that we're not seeing like a massive 20 FPS increase here, nor could this actually do that. But what we are seeing is we're going to be hitting in the 50s now more consistently, especially with combat, which we will showcase here in a little bit. Now, web slinging was interesting, and this is where you can see it starts getting blurry, right? Notice that the Spider-Man character model is blurry around the edges, and that's how they're actually increasing the FPS, is that it is, again, it's dropping the resolution. So this is why I don't personally prefer ultra performance. I would just turn this down to 800p, and I could do balance and get something that was very similar to this, visually speaking and FPS wise. But web slinging here, we were seeing low 40s when we had this on balanced, and that kind of would be towards middle 40s, almost the same actually if we left it on performance, moving up from balanced. But then jumping to ultra, we will see it is mid to upper 40s, maybe even getting into the 50s. And you'll also see, again, if I'm up on the rooftop, it just holds consistently at 60, where before it was kind of jumping around in the 50s. So I'm going to be coming up on a fight scene here, and then we can see the difference in the fight scene where, again, it's going to hold 50s on this, which is pretty awesome. But when it gets super blurry, I personally prefer the visual fidelity at that point. The combat is already smooth when it is in the 40s. I don't notice an insane increase visually in terms of the smoothness and the action, right? The animations when I'm getting the 50s over the mid 40s. Now, if I'm going from like the mid 20s, maybe the low 30s, yeah, it does look way smoother. But again, it's going to be what's your preference here. I just think 1080p balance is just going to be the sweet spot. You can go medium, or you can even go high with that, and it still performs quite well. Well, that's actually going to be it for this one. I want to give another thank you to Nick for helping me out with this video. Hopefully we have more for you guys in the future. If you like the video, definitely let us know. If you want to see more, let us know as well in the comment section. If you have any questions, I will answer that for you there as well. And that's going to wrap this one up. I'm going to put a link for Nick's channel so you guys can actually check his channel out. Give him a sub. He has a lot of great content over there. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like button for me. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.